Hello, and welcome back to the Bober Academy Football Podcast, where our mission is to train and develop superior linemen to dominate on the gridiron. I'm your host, Chris Bober, 8 years in the NFL, 4 years in the Giants, 4 years at the Chiefs, and now I'm the head coach, the head offensive line coach at Creighton Prep and operate the Bober Academy. And today, as always, on our Building a Lineman series, we're joined by Nolan Clausen of Midwest Movement. Just really quick before we get started, a reminder is if you are watching this on YouTube, right down there is the subscribe button. As we grow our numbers, we get our message out to more and more people. Of course, click the bell for notifications. And on any social media where you're watching this, please like, share, retweet, comment, all those things. Be sure if you're on a podcast app to subscribe to our channel so you get notified of new messages. So we are continuing our Building a Lineman series, and we're a little bit delayed here, but there's a good reason for that. You know, Dr. Nolan over there and him and his wife welcomed a beautiful child here very recently. So congratulations, Dr. Nolan.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, so a little baggy underneath the eyes and just a little tired, but we're doing great.
I know how it goes. I got a different kind of bags. I got teenagers and adult children, and they're more expensive baggage that comes with that. But all right, so as we move on this, we moved up the bodies. Last time we talked about the core and the back, and now we're getting to the upper body, right? And these specifically what we're going to talk about today is our shoulders. And shoulders are a pretty unique joint because they do take the brunt of so much pressure, right? There's a lot of strength issues there, a lot of flexibilities. And tell us about, like, especially for offensive linemen, tell us how the shoulders work for O linemen.
And I mean, I'm going to back up. Actually, you talked about how unique of a joint they are, and you're right. They are extremely unique. Pretty much every other joint in our body has a lot of bone-on-bone contact or a good connection to the rest of our body. Our shoulders, however, the only bony attachment to our trunk is actually our clavicle, which goes out to here, which is the AC joint. And then that's the only bone connection to the rest of our body, right? How often do you hear of people breaking clavicles? All the time, right? Yeah. So the shoulder is one of the most unique joints because basically your shoulder blade sits over the top of your ribs right here, and it just moves right here. And on that shoulder blade is where you get your humerus or your arm that attaches to it. And basically it is a floating joint that is attached to the rest of the body, and meaning a lot of the reason or the way it stays attached to our body is through muscles, tons of muscles. There's 17 muscles that attach to the shoulder blade, which is a lot of muscles, right? And all 17 of those muscles have to work in coordination with each other to be able to give us this freedom of motion, but also be able to give us the strength and the strength of the pressing overhead, the pulling, all of that. They have to work together to keep the shoulder stable enough to perform those tasks, but also mobile enough to perform those tasks. So like when you just asked about offensive linemen, right? We have, usually we're pushing 300 plus pound other linemen around, and the brunt of that is basically absorbing that through our arms. And so we have to make sure we have really strong shoulders so that we can absorb the brunt of that force. And we have been building a lineman from the ground up, right? So if you have shoulder problems and things like that, I would really urge you to start from the ground and work your way up, because there's a lot of dysfunctions and pains and injuries that we see in people. It's because their cores aren't working right. Their glutes aren't firing, and things like that. And so like we can rehab a shoulder all we want and do all the right things, but if we don't address where that really started from, we're just going to be chasing our tail.
So that would be more like addressing the symptoms rather than the cause of what's going on with it. And what I'm learning and going through these Building a Lineman series is that really it all kind of starts from the inside out, right? Yep. Our core, our spine, our midsection is the area where it's kind of like the hinge point in there that everything kind of goes out from there. And in fact, I think you talked about going up and down a chain. And if the middle is our core, then our shoulders would be very comparable to like what our hips are to our legs, right?
Correct.
So they operate very, very similarly. They rotate and do all kinds of stuff. But the shoulders they have the blessing of having more freedom of motion. They have a little bit more functionality up front, up top, I mean, but they also aren't as connected right there. So as far as linemen go, obviously the shoulders are a big part of what we do. Because what I say is you generate your power, from the ground, from your power core, the big muscles in the middle of your body, your glutes, your hamstrings, hips, and all that stuff. But then it's transferred up through our core with stability, and it's unleashed with our weapons. And the base of those weapons is our shoulders. So how do you, when you strike and when you do things as a lineman, what are some of the things that linemen need to kind of look out for?
A lot of stuff like we're talking about leverage, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of times with linemen. And basically the more we get our elbows out here, the more compromised that shoulder or that position is, right? So like we talking about it a lot, like with our necks, but like if you had a bowling ball in your hand and you're holding it right here, I'm sure anybody that's listening to this could stand here and hold it probably an hour, right?
Mm-hmm.
As soon as we get that bowling ball away from our body, basically it becomes way harder to hold that out there. We become fatigued and all those things, right? Our muscles aren't as effective. So same thing with our shoulder. We joke around that our shoulder is like a golf ball sitting on a golf tee, right? And we don't have gravity helping us. We turn it on our sides, right? And so the best thing that we can do is we don't want to be chicken winging our arms out here. We want to keep them closed and compact when we're blocking and things like that. That way we can use those lats to really press. And so like this kind of goes back to a little bit of my frustration in gyms and things like that, is seeing big offensive linemen out there bench pressing and their arms are right here, right? Yeah. Like, why would we train the way that we're told not to do it on the football field? Like, let's use the training to transfer out onto the football field as best as we can. We're not lifting weights for some arbitrary reason. Like, we're lifting weights to get stronger so that we're better on the football field. So when we're bench pressing, like, ideally try to keep those elbows tucked in and really pressing right here. If we had to pick favorite exercises, because we got to press, right?
Well, before we get in the exercises, I want to kind of relate that a little bit to football, right? So when I train my guys both at Creighton Prep and in my Bober Academy, the favorite phrase I like to use is to rub your ribs with your elbow, right? And I tell them, man, I like ribs. I just made some this weekend. I love them. And the secret of ribs is a good rub, right? The secret of hand placement and knowing which position to have your hands in is to rub your ribs with your elbow, because that's where you're the strongest. And what I'll do is I'll demonstrate. I'll say, okay, well, you put your inline here, put your hand here, and see if I can move you or move it. And they're like, yeah, that's pretty strong. I say, okay, now put your hand out here and tell me if you got function, if you got strength here, and I can easily push them. And that also affects their core too, right? Because it requires a bit more leverage and you have more length here. And I know personally, not only are you stronger there, but I've hurt my shoulder by, having a guy come in on a blitz and I reach out for him and rubbed it right back the wrong way. So as when it comes to striking, whether you're an offensive lineman or a tackler or a receiver, whoever you are, it's always best to be compact and being tighter than anything, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Just as much as we can keep that compact. A really unstable joint, keep it compact as much as possible. It's just going to better us with strength, reduce injury, all of that. So absolutely. So yeah.
So okay. So now first let's kind of take it in steps here. And we'll say that offensive linemen, we're in the summer. We're in I call it the fourth quarter of getting ready. So you're doing a lot of functional exercises. We're practicing today. But you're also kind of getting towards the season. So it's not so much about building strength. It's like building functionality in there. So when they go to the weight room and when they go and do exercises, whether it's lifting or any kind of functional exercises for their position, as it pertains to the shoulder, what are some general guidelines of how, I know we talked about the core, right? Set your core and do your exercise like that. But tell me about the shoulders, some of the exercises, not specifically, but also a general concept of how do you want to think about your shoulders and how they affect taking it from the weight room and the training room to the football field.
Yeah. First off, like when we are blocking, rarely are we like, I'm going to pretend like we're bench pressing. Rarely are we bench pressing or blocking like this, right? We should be down here and we're actually pressing up, right?
Yeah.
So I would, if I were me and you had barbell bench versus barbell incline, always go incline because that more transfers onto the football field, right? Now, if we have barbell and just dumbbells, I would almost always go with the dumbbells because we have that ability to, one, turn our hands right here versus right here, right? So, and then we have to, stabilize, right? We don't get the luxury of when we're blocking that it's just even pressure when we're blocking, right? So like, let's mimic as much on the football field as possible. So incline with dumbbells, great exercise.
Single arm, would you say single arm are really good too? Because you're never going to be, it's never going to be stable here. You're always going to be here or here.
Yeah, absolutely. And even like varying tempos, right? So you could go both out, then one lower, and then you explode out, right? Work on that punch. The other thing that we can do that's kind of mimicking that is a kneeling med ball toss into a wall and just really exploding. We like to, when we are programming like bench press or incline presses or anything horizontal pressing, we'll do our sets. So say we had a set of 8 incline dumbbell bench press, we'll immediately go to doing 3 really explosive med ball passes, just trying to keep that transferability onto the football field as much as possible. Okay.
Yeah, so more functional there. I love you talked about the strength of having your thumbs up, right? This is a strong position out like this. And when I teach my guys to punch, a good O-line coach I played with and I worked with, he calls it a pillar punch, where you're punching and you're extending. It's really coming from through your wrist all the way up to your shoulder here. When you introduce the hand in here, that's a weak joint. You know what I mean? So it's really coming from here. And the only way to truly accomplish that is to have your thumbs up and strike here. That's why the med balls are such a great tool. When I work on striking, I work on striking a med ball because it's more simulating what a functional punch is going to be as an offensive lineman.
Yep, absolutely. Another way is if we're going to do shoulder press overhead at any way, like I see a lot of guys that will get out here and they'll be doing presses here. But bring that elbow into the front, transfers onto the football field, and let's keep that up by our ear and like try to keep it as close to the head the entire through that entire exercise. So we could do a set of 8 dumbbell shoulder presses, right? And then immediately what we can do is go to kneeling and do med ball tosses, and let's throw them as high as you can if you have the ability to do it.
Yeah, I love the idea of having some explosion in there because very rarely does a defensive lineman come into you and you just press them off nice and slow, right? There's an explosive factor that probably triggers different things in your muscles that'll more simulate that. So those are some of the strength stuff. How about like stability, right? Like, and we're going to probably do the next one about some specific ones, but just as an offensive lineman, is there some things that they should be doing, that just works on the stabilizing? Because remember, we're not attached with bone. It's just all muscle. Some of those muscles are really little ones. So it's, what are some of the things they could be doing now as they're, 6-8 weeks away from football to strengthen that? Because shoulders not only press, they also stabilize. And that's where I see most guys get hurt with like labrums and tears like that is the stabilization factor. So what's some of the things they can do for stabilization?
I'm so happy you brought that up, and I can't believe I almost forgot about that whole part. Like that's my joy is stability. So I'm a big favor of bear crawls, right? Load up those hands, right? And we're working cross crawl and doing bear crawls, right? Um, we're integrating our core, keeping stacked here. So we don't want to see butts clear up in the air. We want to see a flat spine, basically be able to set a drink and be able to do a bear crawl. It loads the hips.
Mm-hmm.
So basically we're loading like we're running or we're blocking, we're stepping with an arm and we're pressing with the other one, right?
Mm-hmm.
So bear crawls are really good at integrating that. But also when we're pressing into the ground, our shoulder blade muscles have to hold the spine up so that it's not falling towards the ground. So like when we do that, we want to push the ground away. It's a lot of people will call it a push-up plus. When you're doing a push-up, pushing your spine, or like even just like here and then even pushing a little bit more. Then we can do bear crawls a little bit more, like maybe a little bit of rounding right in between the shoulder blades. Anytime we can do things like that, some stability in there. Another one that I really like is taking a band and putting it around your hands right here, putting your elbows up against the wall and just slowly walking up, right? So our shoulders are moving a little bit, but the shoulder blade muscles are working really hard to stabilize in those areas.
Nice. And, so those are some good exercises. We're going to have to come back and like we've done with the other parts, we're going to come back and show you those. Sometimes I'm the guinea pig on those ones there. But last question before we wrap it up here. Tell me about like shoulder posture and how important that is, because I feel like in our society, we look at our phones, we look at computers, we're kind of rounded here. But when we go and try to work on posture, should we be in the habit of pulling our shoulder blades together as far as how our shoulders work? I feel like from there you can get like full extension rather than being here and going out and maybe being a little prone to more injuries and stuff.
Yeah. I feel like we're kind of like in this day and age right now, we're trying to correct people that over postured, right? We definitely don't want to be here. We now have a bunch of kids that are on their phones and things like that, right? And so everybody is around saying sit up, and so we're like really overcorrecting. So
which that gives you a negative spine angle. I feel I saw that in you, right?
Yeah, and so what we try to tell people as much as possible, like I don't care about your posture. What we really care about is your next posture, right? So moving more, quit sitting in the same position. But if we know we got to sit for an hour, we're going to church, we got to sit for an hour. One of the things that I like to do is sit up nice and tall, back off 10%.
Okay.
That will help us get into these postures. It'll also help those shoulder blade muscles, like get some tension, back off just a little bit and create some stability. And I forgot to mention this when we're doing exercises and things like that. It's kind of different with football. Football's about the only sport where we do a lot of pressing. I mean, boxing a little bit, but it's one of the only sports that we actually truly need bench press or those horizontal pushing. But ideally, for shoulder health, we still need to do a lot of pulling, and we primarily want to prioritize pulling over pushing.
Yeah, 2 to 1 is kind of the ratio I've kind of heard you recommend it to me, is for every bench or pushing exercise, include at least 2 of the pulling working on your back. That's just a much bigger set of muscles that will really help to stabilize, right?
Correct. Yeah.
Nice. And so I'll stabilize your shoulders. So that's all great stuff here. Offensive lineman, here's what I know. Knock on wood here. I had some minor shoulder injuries, AC sprain, stuff like that. And I still probably got some sort of tear in my shoulder here, but it's not bad enough to keep me out of the game. But when people do injure their shoulders, it's a long recovery because there's a lot of muscles and it takes just like their hips, takes a long time. So it is in your benefit out there for you coaches and trainers that are out there, or you players that are listening and watching this, to focus in on your shoulder health, right? Focusing on the strength, the stability, all the things we talked about. And I know we're going to come back and we're going to show you some of those here next time, because it's just too hard to describe with just talking about it. So once again, Dr. Nolan, you continue to amaze us with your knowledge and your functional ability to help us function as offensive linemen. And I really hope people out there appreciate that and can see that this is something that can make you a better offensive lineman, better athlete in general. So thank you very much.
Yep. Thank
Awesome.
you. And I can't wait to get you in here and start burning up those shoulders a little bit.
I'm sure I'm going to suffer a little bit, but all right, we're going to wrap it up here. But thanks everyone for listening and watching. So if you're watching this, well, other way, right down there is our YouTube channel. Subscribe to it, like, comment, share, repost, retweet, all the things you do out there. And thank you so much for supporting Bober Academy. BoberAcademy.com is where you can find us. Midwest Movement, Elkhorn.com is where you can find Nolan. All this will be in the captions wherever you are listening or watching it. So have a great day out there. Go out there and get better and get ready to dominate on the gridiron this fall. See you, Nolan.
See ya.